The city of Abydos became the first center of pilgrimage in history. For to the pious Egyptian, there was no greater bliss than to be buried beside the tomb of Osiris, or, failing this, to have his mummy brought temporarily to Abydos to receive the desired consecration, or at the very least to recommend to the favor of Osiris, Lord of the underworld, by the erection of a cenotaph or a memorial stone. Osiris' sister and wife Isis, their son Horus, and under the new kingdom Betah and Ra-Hur-Akhti and Ammon were also worshipped in Abydos. Annually, plays were performed here in honor of Osiris when his eternal terrestrial cycle of death and rebirth was celebrated. Excavations proved that throughout the entire ancient Egyptian history, pharaohs had enhanced the fame of Abydos and its sacred position in Egypt. From the Old Kingdom, a lot of kings' names were found. They have contributed in enlarging the Big Temple, like Neferkara from the 5th dynasty, Pepi I, Meren-Ra, Pepi II from the 6th dynasty. Even during the erupted times of the first intermediate period, we find King Kheti II blaming and scolding himself for the grave fault of not knowing that the royal tombs in Abydos were violated by robbers. From the 12th dynasty, a text was found written by the minister of King Sesostris I, whose name is Mentuhotep. During the time of his successor, King Amun-Imhad II, an employee called Khenti Msemti was sent to inspect the temples. He has also inscribed his name here and has recorded his visit in the place where Osiris, the first lord of the West, dwells, and where everyone hurries seeking his consent. The famous warrior of the 12th dynasty, King Sesostris III, who ruled Egypt in 1878 BC, owns a famous pyramid in Dahshur, as well as a rock tomb here in Abydos, where his body might have remained for a while before being buried in his pyramid. He had sent 2 employees to adorn Abydos' temple with gold. Luckily, they both left records of their work. One of them was called Icher Nefret, who was a head of the safe houses, told us with great joy how he fulfilled his duties and acted as a beloved son for Osiris, and taught the priests how to do their jobs. But the most important event in his visit was that he shared in the play performed here and took part in it with an unlimited enthusiasm. His description of the various events in the play has contributed a lot in the study of the cult of Osiris. During the reign of the rest of the kings of the 12th dynasty, Abydos retained its sacred position. During the turbulence that happened in the second intermediate period in Egypt, the city of Abydos went through difficult times. We find King Neferhotep doing a full restoration to the statues and all the requirements of the cult of God Osiris. He was very enthusiastic, as he himself was a son of a priest. He had even participated himself in the play of pain that concerns Osiris. It was only natural for Abydos to have a part of the prosperity that overwhelmed Egypt after expelling the Hyksos and hence enlarging the country. almost every single pharaoh from the 18th dynasty left an evidence here of caring about the temple of the god, whose cult became one of the two major religions in Egypt, the cult of god Osiris. Amun-Ra acquired the first position, being the god of Thebes, the capital of the country. King Thutmose III in particular had done a great deal of restoration, and Thutmose IV entailed a vast area of land to the temple and maintained a continuous supply of animal sacrifices. By the beginning of the 19th dynasty, Abydos reached its peak of power and wealth. Kings Ramesses I, Seti I, and Ramesses II dedicated themselves to elevate Osiris' position in his great temple. From that time, Osiris mythology became one of the aspects of the Egyptian religion, and it was one which strongly appealed to the world, being very distinguished among the general Egyptian creeds. Gods Web-Wawut, Khenti-Amenti, and Wen-Nefer, and all the rest of the gods of the dead and netherworld became united in only one god, Osiris. That leading position continued until the end of the Egyptian religion as a living creed, to the extent that every deceased was defined by him, and talking about Osiris someone became like talking today about late someone. Nothing stays the same. It was natural that the downfall of Egypt lead to a fall in the amount of royal donations to Osiris' temple, as well as all the other temples in Egypt. In spite of the fact that King Ramesses III had done a lot of efforts in Abydos' temple, yet it seemed that during the reign of Amasis II in the 26th dynasty, the local governor usurped the possessions of the temple. So the pharaoh sent the head of his doctors, who was also a priest, to set things right. The well-accomplished doctor, called Befnaf-Dinit, tells us in a text inscribed on his statue, which is now in the Louvre Museum, how he achieved his task successfully and confiscated the aggressor's stolen possessions as a fulfillment of Osiris' wishes. The doctor didn't forget to end his work by participating in the play of pain, just like Ikher-Nefret had done 13 centuries before. In spite of the work done here by King Nectanebo I and II, the glory of Abydos was obliterated after the text of the doctor. The temples that once flourished in the greatest sacred place on earth were devastated, and the hidden royal tombs were violated. By the time the Romans ruled, Osiris' position faded away in the shadows of his wife, goddess Isis, whose popularity swept all other cults, including his. Nevertheless, he will always be remembered as a god who carved his way throughout the 3,000 years of civilization, and right from the beginning acquired a main and beloved position in the heart of the people, and his temple here in Abydos was the first pilgrimage center on earth, the place which everyone hoped to visit either before or after death, to guarantee a fair judgment and an eternal life in heaven next to his precious god, Osiris. of the house, god Osiris owns a sanctuary that lies next to the central sanctuary of god Ammon, the sun god, in Abydos temple, and enjoys a very wide space which Ammon himself doesn't have. The king kneels in front of Osiris, behind whom stands his wife Isis. God Webawot, the opener of the road, has a jackal head and stands in front of Seti. He is a warrior who marches in front of kings and lead their way to victory. This is the only sanctuary amongst the 7 that doesn't have false doors, but instead opens to other small sanctuaries that lie behind the main 7 and are dedicated to him and his family, or as they are called, the triad of the temple: Osiris, Isis, and Horus. In this special hall, the ceiling is held by 10 columns arranged in 2 rows. The central room belongs to Osiris. To his right is Isis, and to his left is the one dedicated to his son, Horus. The scenes in these sanctuaries represent Seti first offering the gods his gifts, sometimes taking the shape of Osiris himself, while the rest of the gods greet him. They are remarkable with the perfection of handcraft and colors. The beautiful reliefs all around the hall sum up the slogans and the main symbols of the cult of god Osiris, including the slogan of Abydos and the head of Osiris, in addition to the Jed and Tet, symbols of Osiris and Isis, and the symbol of Osiris, where the spinal column of Osiris was supposed to be buried. The entrance of Abydos temple is in the northeast, but the pylon is completely destroyed, as well as the first court, but some stones still exist in its southeast corner. They bear reliefs of King Ramesses II in his wars and victories. At the end of the court is an ascending aisle that leads to one line of pillars, which had stood once upon a time in front of the pylon that had 3 openings that lead to the second court. That one is destroyed too, but lesser than the first one. The standing walls still have reliefs that represent King Ramesses II, the one who has built the outer section of the temple when he added to his late father's constructions. At the end of the court is an aisle, ascending similarly to the first one, and leads as well to a terrace decorated with 12 pillars, built of limestone over bases of sandstone, behind which are 7 doors opposing the 7 sanctuaries that lie at the rear of the temple. King Ramesses closed 6 of them, leaving the central one as a main entrance to the inner parts of the temple. Here we find a notable difference in design than that of the ordinary design of an Egyptian temple, for it was only natural that the temple extends to the back on the same main axis, but this is not what happened here. For no known reason, the engineers of King Seti I constructed the rest of their buildings in an angle perpendicular to the main axis. Most probably, the reason could be connected to the religious creeds, but they all serve to one purpose: the cult of god Osiris. of the house, god Osiris, owns a sanctuary that lies next to the central sanctuary of god Ammon, the sun god, in Abydos temple, and enjoys a very wide space which Ammon himself doesn't have. The king kneels in front of Osiris, behind whom stands his wife Isis. God Webawot, the opener of the road, has a jackal head and stands in front of Seti. He is a warrior who marches in front of kings and lead their way to victory. This is the only sanctuary amongst the 7 that doesn't have false doors, but instead opens to other small sanctuaries that lie behind the main 7 and are dedicated to him and his family, or as they are called, the triad of the temple: Osiris, Isis, and Horus. In this special hall, the ceiling is held by 10 columns arranged in 2 rows. The central room belongs to Osiris. To his right is Isis, and to his left is the one dedicated to his son, Horus. The scenes in these sanctuaries represent Seti first offering the gods his gifts, sometimes taking the shape of Osiris himself, while the rest of the gods greet him. They are remarkable with the perfection of handcraft and colors. The beautiful reliefs all around the hall sum up the slogans and the main symbols of the cult of god Osiris, including the slogan of Abydos and the head of Osiris, in addition to the Jed and Tet, symbols of Osiris and Isis, and the symbol of Osiris, where the spinal column of Osiris was supposed to be buried.